Callie, welcome back to the program. Thank you for your patience this morning. Tim Burchett that man can just spin a yarn.
That was great.
Yeah, dude. Okay, so like he was talking about something that I think is very near and dear to both of our hearts, and it's how I'd like to actually address this conversation, because I'm no scientist, and I look forward to you and you and Nurse Kate, you guys can talk the science of all of this. I don't have that background. The background that I do have is I'm a proud father, and I want like more young men to embrace that and to fall in love, get married, own land, to have homes, to start families. And I want to talk about the science behind all of that. And obviously, you have spent your life working on this question. But perhaps I'd like an open question for you. Like, how do we even begin to start that process? And I'll just end with this, a special note here from Gallup, that young Trump voters, young men who you have spoken to for your entire career, those young men, you've won, dude. Charlie won because they listed fatherhood, starting a family, as their number one priority. Out of 14 different priorities, fatherhood was number one for young male Trump voters under 30. So we've won that battle. Now what do we do for these guys?
I think we got to keep the pedal to the metal here, because I think what's happening at the Trump White House is, and I think this came through with the Charlie Kirk Memorial and your comments and everyone's comments there. There wasn't a mention of real policy, really. And when it comes to healthcare,
yes.
What's causing issues in this country and this feeling of a lot of people that we're going the wrong direction isn't the Medicare reimbursement rates. It's not the doc fix issues that they're talking about in Congress, all this minutia. There's really something spiritual happening. And I think what President Trump and Secretary Kennedy are opening up. I think our medical system has been anti-life. I mean, when my sister was at Stanford Medical School, the kind of motherhood is kind of seen as a burden. At Harvard Medical School and Stanford Medical School, I think still to this day, they're not allowed to say the word mother. They say the word birthing person. Going to Stanford and Harvard and kind of seeing in this world, it's just ingrained in our generation that starting a family was kind of a less than activity, that being a mom was a less than activity, that cooking for the family, cooking healthy food is a less than activity. So there's really forces, I think, that have led us in the wrong direction over the last couple decades. And that's what we're talking about at the White House. I mean, healthcare policy is very important. I think the government shut down over Obamacare, which has been a total disaster. We need to think hard on healthcare policy. But I think there's a real license that's being given to the American people right now for a conversation that's more cultural. It gets to the foundation of our priorities as a country. And that filters into the MAGA priorities we're pushing. I mean, I'm just looking at polling here and the American people when they're asked about big issues, pharma corruption, putting too much influence in public policy on drugging and drugging kids instead of getting the root cause of what they're doing. 90% of people support that. Childhood obesity, I can't think of a more glaring example of our cultural prioritization of children and where we've lost our way, that 50% of teens are overweight or obese, 90% of Americans think that's a massive issue. The toxic chemicals in our environment, many of these chemicals are really important, but having a real conversation about that. Clearly, our children's hormones are being absolutely bombarded. Girls often are hitting puberty 5 years earlier than they did a generation ago. Unhealthy food. I mean, supporting our farmers. 90% of people think that's a major issue. So these are the type of issues that I think get to this, almost spiritual concept of what we're prioritizing as a country. And I do think, Benny, I think in 50 years, when history books are written, we're going to look at U.S. fertility and birth rates. We're going to look at childhood obesity rates, childhood diabetes rates. These rates are all going to improve, and it's going to start this year because all of those are going in the wrong direction now. And I think what's happening in the conversation that the Trump administration is opening is not going back in the bottle, and it's just going to we're just going to see better and better results.
Can you talk to me about a study that sent a chill through certainly my family's dinner table, as it was the conversation 2 nights ago, of a Harvard study that tried to use more finite data to track obesity, assuming that they would get lower numbers for American obesity, that they weren't using the right BMI numbers, and perhaps that they could actually fine-tune the obesity rates in America. And it ended up kicking back to a 70% obesity rate in the country. That's obscene, Callie.
70% obesity. And listen, Benny,
Do you agree with that study?
Yeah.
Do you track that? Do you agree? Do you think that that's a good?
It's unbelievable. We've been undercounting it. For teens, it's when you add up overweight and obesity, it's over 50%, but it's 70% obesity. So what is obesity? This is something that if you had 100 years ago, literally there was a case report written about it because it was so rare, and you were in the circus. Like somebody that would just be an average American today would be literally they'd be in the circus 100 years ago. This is an absolutely unprecedented phenomenon of our bodies crying out for help, and it's the visible symbol of what's happening invisibly in our body. I mean, you've got over 50% of the U.S. population diabetic or pre-diabetic. This is 33% of young adults and teens are pre-diabetic. This is something that would have been 0 cases a generation ago. And I also think it's important, Benny, we don't want to give Europe much credit, and they don't deserve much credit for most things. But it's a pronounced difference between the U.S. and the other developed countries. I mean, we have 6 times the childhood obesity rate in the United States versus other countries, 6 to 8 times higher childhood diabetes rates. I mean, this is in Japan, the number of obese adults is somewhere in the realm of 3%. And we're talking, so there's pronounced differences. And then we're talking about healthcare costs. Again, this is not a policy issue. The reason we have the highest healthcare costs in the world is because we are the sickest population in the developed world. Today in America, we have the highest cancer rates of any society in the history of human civilization. So when I look at this, and when Secretary Kennedy looks at this, when President Trump looks at this, this is not because there's something inherently wrong with the American people. There is something systemic happening. And I think the foundation of MAGA, to me, is asking tough questions about the incentives in our military industrial complex and our education industrial complex, what's happened to immigration and health. There's corporate capture, corruption, incentives that have led this to happen, and we need to ask tough questions. And the problem is that the media is funded by these very industries that profit from these rates. There's been nothing more profitable to the U.S. economy, quite frankly, than obesity, because healthcare is the largest part of the U.S. economy right now. It's 30% of the federal budget. And that money based on corruption is going to companies that profit from higher obesity rates. They'll lose money if Americans thrive. They'll lose money if we start reading the Bible, going to church, cooking for our families, having more kids, getting back to basics. They will lose money if that happens. So I think there is, and it's not individuals. We're meeting with all these people. There's good people in the farm industry, good people in these other industries, but there are forces that are very dark here that have profited from those increased rates of obesity.
You've been doing God's work, and it's been remarkable to see. I mean, everything from pharmaceutical prices to from the drug companies to the manufacturers of food, taking the dyes out of the food. It seems like there has been a remarkable number of wins, and I want to see the numbers turn around. And I think you're right. When history tells this tale, this will be the moment. There's a fascinating, since you brought it up, there's a fascinating chart that caught my attention last week. I want to get your response to this, which is the fertility rates between conservatives and progressives in the country. And perhaps you've seen this. This is a data that's been tracked and pretty regularly, pretty scientifically. And what you can see here is that conservatives have, while the fertility rate for progressives have absolutely and totally collapsed through the floor, conservatives have lost about a point, but have sort of been bending the curve, hopefully. Obviously, being a family man, being a father is something that is right-wing coded. All available data shows this. If you're 30 and above and you have no kids, there's a 72% chance that you are a Democrat or a progressive. 55% of all fathers are Republicans in this country. Family creation, family units is something that is done by people who feel a strong sense of community and a strong sense of purpose in this country. What party does that describe? And I think this makes a lot of sense, but I'm not the scientist here, Callie. What does this chart say to you? Why the difference here in these two worldviews in fertility rates?
I think the conservatives are more and more questioning the psyop that's happened over the past 30 years, where women were told that it's, a less than activity to give birth, a less than activity to have a family, where so many forces of our healthcare system, our agriculture system were about, I think, anti-life concepts. And I think the Trump party, the MAGA movement, fundamentally for me is about courage of questioning the existing assumptions that we've been led to believe in our schools and led to believe from our healthcare institutions. We're the CDC. We're getting grilled by the media for taking on the CDC leadership. The CDC released a while back a document on the 10 greatest advancements in public health in human history, and abortion was on there, and smaller family sizes was on the CDC website as one of the most important advancements in the history of human health. I can't express to you, and this is everyone watching, with the messy news on all these fronts, it is impossible for the Trump administration to take on the orthodoxy that's led to our immigration system, that's led to from the top of the CDC, a feeling that smaller families is a public health miracle, from the ingrained incentives, the anti-life incentives in our healthcare system that says that it is impossible. And this is what is said in the guidance right now that we're inheriting, that it is impossible and actually sexist to assume that mothers can cook healthy food for their children, and the best we can possibly do is feed kids ultra-processed crap because it's actually sexist because moms are working so hard. We can't possibly expect mothers to cook healthy food for their kids. I cannot tell you how much I hear that, Benny, from leaders in public health. The DEI argument that we cannot ask mothers and cannot expect American families to cook healthy food for their kids. So the best we can possibly do is feed the kids ultra-processed crap and then figure out better drugs to give to kids. And now 40% of teens are on a pharmaceutical product. This is the ingrained culture in every single institution, an anti-life culture that the Trump administration, President Trump, sits at his desk every single day, calls Secretary Kennedy, calls the other administration officials and says, I've got your back, go hard, get these people out, refresh the culture, refresh this. And I think when it comes to health, to a more pro-life in every single respect mindset. So I think conservatives are questioning that. And my hope, Benny, because of course this is bipartisan. Of course, and according to these polls, every American wants something different. If we can keep fighting, keep winning, keep MAGA as the preeminent dominant force in American politics for the next 10 years, we're going to change the overall culture of this country. And I think even those progressives are going to come on board and realize we really lost our way.
Men are already there. If you go to any college campus and ask young men, do you want low or high fertility?
Right.
In yourself, you as a man. What do you think the question's going to be? What do you think 1,000 out of 1,000 young college-age males are going to say? And this is something that I think is really good because this is going to be obviously a driving culture. Here's the chart, by the way, the polling from Gallup that says that young men want to start families. That is the number one goal for a young Trump supporter. The family creation. We will never get this again, Callie. This is a generational opportunity to crush our enemies, to defeat neo-Marxism and whatever pagan sick ideology is out there that is trying to warp and destroy the minds of young men. We have this opportunity. What is your message to these young men from a scientific perspective about, one, raising your fertility rate, like raising the capacity for you to have families, to have healthy children? You are the master at this, Callie. Preach to these young men.
There's something very subversive to the powers that be of those stats. I just read an article about China, and they're actually stepping up. They're jailing Christian pastors who are talking about these exact concepts of better family values. There's actually in the past month a massive crackdown of a network in China because Christianity is essentially banned, but people are doing it online and services online. These people are being jailed and they're disappearing, the Christian pastors. There's something with authoritarian governments, with governments that want to send our children to public schools, to indoctrinate them, to have them sedentary. 40% of schools don't even have required recess, to feed ultra-processed food down their throats, to tell boys that it's not appropriate to be masculine, to tell girls that the best thing they can possibly do for the world is go out and work in a cubicle and motherhood is denigrated. There's forces, and it's related to this MAGA element. What I tell those men is keep going. Listen to the message of Charlie Kirk. This is not a political issue; it's a spiritual issue. And politically, what I would say to everybody listening is this political moment is opening up and giving license to this messy cultural conversation that's happening. I think what's happening in the country, as Charlie said, is much more important than what's being voted on in Congress, or even the policies coming out of the White House. There's a cultural momentum happening where there's a rare generational moment to rethink our priorities as a country. Based on what you just said, Benny, I agree. This is a singular moment. But I do think what the Trump administration is doing is they are encouraging this conversation. The most inspiring part for me, Benny, seeing inside that White House is everyone knows they're giving license to a very messy conversation, but it has to happen. Usually people try to control things more. Usually the government is trying to control things. We're encouraging this conversation about spirituality, about core concepts like feminism and how we think about that, about the family, about everything that impacts our health, like food, how we make it, to our pharmaceutical paradigms, our prioritizations as a country. What I think is important for everyone to realize is you need to keep supporting this movement. I think politically it is existential to the survival of this country that MAGA is the preeminent political movement in the next 10 years. We need to keep going. We need to grow this movement because that movement is giving license to this conversation continuing. I think on the other side, they are trying to denigrate this conversation. They're trying to call us racist, sexist, all the different things. They're trying to characterize this movement as they're doing with Secretary Kennedy and President Trump, who are getting maligned on every single thing they say. We need to keep this going and win. We have to win because the political moment gives the license to this wider cultural conversation.
You brought up processed food in virtually every single answer. Obviously, you're featured here in this brand new documentary available on Amazon and Apple, Breaking Big Food. You are one of the cast members here who gives your expert opinion along with an all-star cast, talking through how to make sure that we are not poisoning ourselves as a country. Can you please sort of set the table, as it were, for this documentary?
Benny, I love how you open the conversation, and we're not just talking about food. The reason I go to food a lot is because I think it's very important, but it's also a gateway to really have people question our priorities as a country that gets to much larger spiritual and cultural issues. What this film does is, to me, represents the greatest accomplishment of the MAGA movement, of the Trump administration when it comes to health, which again is not the policy, but this movie highlights individual moms, individual families who are kind of on that treadmill, thinking less kids was better, thinking, oh, I'm too busy to not serve the kids anything other than ultra processed crap, thinking that a good American was somebody that unquestionably listened to their pediatricians and just did everything they said with no questions asked. That's how I was raised. That's how I used to be. That's how a lot of us used to be. We used to trust institutions. And I think the food issue is one of the biggest gateway drugs, quite frankly, to realizing we've really been lied to. We've really been lied to in the nutrition guidelines, which, by the way, are going to be updated very soon by the Trump administration. But until today, they have never said that ultra-processed or highly processed food was harmful for kids. Right now, 70% of a child's diet is ultra-processed food. That used to be 0% 50 years ago, and in other countries, that's 10%. We've denigrated, I think, our farmers, quite frankly. We spend 6% of our national income on food and 24% on healthcare, whereas Europe spends almost the reverse. They spend much more of their income on food and much less on healthcare because they're less sick. So what this movie talks about, I think as many viewers, I know I've talked to Kate a lot about this, there's just a awakening happening in this country about these fundamental concepts that it's not just health, right? It's just like when you look at a child today, we have a culture that is giving them 78 shots and you're a horrible person for questioning any of those shots, which the Trump administration is brave enough to at least ask questions about. You have ultra processed food being jammed down their throats. We're firing pharmaceutical products down their throats. Kids today are exposed to more toxins. They're exposed to phones. A teenager spends 9 hours a day on their phone. These are all, not necessarily things we should ban, but they're things we should be talking about. They're clearly impacting our child's hormones. And they're clearly things as a family unit, we need to question what our priorities are. It is so positive, Benny, that in the last year, actually, the stats are incredible. You've seen this and you've talked about this. People are going back to church, and that's been declining for a long time. That's changing dramatically, particularly after Charlie Kirk. Snacking in this country has gone down 7%. So the stock market's ripping, but actually junk food companies are doing badly, which I think is good. We're talking to a lot of them, but they're going to have to reassess what the market's telling them. We have people, a tsunami of moms asking their pediatricians more questions, which I think is a good thing. And the greatest thing I hear, and it's highlighted in this movie, is when moms wake up, they're going to their local school board, They're getting better local food in their schools. They're getting cell phones out of schools. That's what the Trump administration's doing, Benny. We're going to be going to the midterms, working with every single red state in the country and even a couple blue states. We're improving food in schools. We're getting cell phones out of schools. The presidential fitness test, which is a huge priority for President Trump. We're integrating throughout the country. We're getting these basics right. And I think that, as this movie highlights, that's the tip of the iceberg to, I think, this invitation to this larger cultural prioritization, spiritual prioritization conversation that you talk about so eloquently, Benny.
Can I tell you something just really embarrassing to end this conversation? This is just between me and you, okay, and the thousands and thousands of people watching live. One of the most common texts I get now is, hey, bro, me and my wife, we're pregnant, and she's so scared about what's going to happen next. Can you give me Nurse Kate's number? We want to talk about these. We want to talk about the shots and the drugs and what's good and what's not. And I'm just constantly passing them off, right? Because people are locked in now. You're exactly right. People are wait a second, I've just been lied to. Everything, COVID, all of it, I just been lied to. Rand Paul was on yesterday, and he just ripped for 30 straight minutes on the evils of Fauci, in the COVID, moment, and how just antithetical to human flourishing and science and all of it was, and that just broke so many people. And it's an incredible opportunity to just reframe the conversation. I'm just really proud that you guys are doing it. It's just awesome. I even in my own small capacity have seen it, in our lives. And people are searching now for real answers. That alone, that questioning alone is a massive victory.
And there's nothing more correlated with a healthy American than having a stable family unit. It all leads to that. Everything, and I got to say, Casey, who looks like will be testifying next week, my sister, talks about this more eloquently and more beautiful than anything. It is not just a tactical policy issue. This all gets back to the family, respect for children, respect for the awe of our bodies and the interconnectivity of our bodies. That's the conversation that I think the Trump administration is very proud that we're opening up. And it's messy. This is messy, but we need to be having it.
Your body is a temple. Sure. Yep, your body's a temple. If you're a Christian, you got to understand, your body's a temple. You should treat it like that. And I think too many Christians forget that. Callie Means is not one of those. Here's Big Food, Breaking Big Food. Here's the website right here. The film is remarkable. He's, sort of scroll through. You can see Callie obviously driving the conversation here. Something perhaps critical to watch during Thanksgiving holiday, right? Or
I think it's a great family movie. It's some good friends created this, and it's going viral. It's a great family movie to watch with your kids.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
You can follow Callie Means right here. He has hundreds of thousands, actually close to 400,000 subscribers on X. Make sure that
not as many as you.
Make sure that
you're the man, Vinny.
It's my great honor to fight alongside you, Callie. Godspeed, man.
Thanks, man.